When she told the tired woman in scrubs to leave business class, she had no idea who she was dealing with. By the time she found out, it was too late. She was being escorted off the plane. What happened at 30,000 feet that turned this flight into her worst nightmare? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Lisa Dawson, a flight attendant, walked down the aisle with her usual air of authority. She had been working for the airline for years and was proud of how well she kept things in order. As she checked on passengers in business class, her eyes suddenly fell on Maya Patel, a woman sitting near the window in seat 3B. She was wearing navy blue scrubs and had her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much. Lisa took a step closer with her hands on her lap and a raised eyebrow. "Excuse me," she said in a sharp voice, "are you sure you're in the right seat?" Maya looked up, blinking tiredly, and handed over her boarding pass. "Yes, I'm in 3B, Lisa said without hesitation. "Lisa, take this ticket," Maya said, shaking her head. "This is business class," Lisa repeated, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Are you traveling alone?" Lisa asked. "Yes," Lisa said. "I think there was a mistake. Business class is for our premium passengers only, so I'll have to move you to economy." A few people nearby looked up, sensing the tension. Some quickly looked away, while others watched with interest. Maya frowned, slightly confused. "I paid for this seat," Lisa said with a forced laugh. "I'm sure there was some kind of mix-up. People sometimes get upgraded by accident, or maybe someone else booked it for you," she said. After 3 days of working back-to-back shifts in the hospital, Maya didn't want to argue. All she wanted was a quiet flight, a meal, and a few hours of rest. Instead, she was being treated like she didn't belong. "Can you check the system?" she asked in a calm but firm voice. "I don't need to check. I've worked here long enough to know who belongs where. Now if you'll follow me, I'll find you another seat." Ma hesitated. The weight of the stairs pressed on her. People around her looked at her with disapproval. No one spoke up or asked what was going on. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others pretended not to hear. She took a slow breath and gathered her bags, her fingers trembling slightly. Lisa, happy that she had fixed the mistake, led her down the aisle to the economy section, where the seats were smaller, tighter, and already full of people who barely gave them a glance. Lisa pointed to an empty seat near the back and said, "This one is available. Quickly, please take it so we can keep boarding." Maya sat down without saying a word. She put her bag under the seat in front of her and stared out the window, her chest tightening with anger. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she was treated like she had stolen the seat. She took out her phone and typed a short message. "Maya, they moved me and told me I couldn't sit in business class." A few seconds later, Patel replied, "What do you mean they moved you?" "Who moved you?" Maya slowly let out a breath. "Flight attendant Maya didn't believe I had a real ticket." There was a long pause, then another message, "Aiden, what's the flight number?" Maya quickly checked her boarding pass and sent him the information. He replied right away, "Stay where you are," and Maya locked her phone and stared out the window. Her mind was racing, but she knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Maya sat in her crowded economy seat, her heart still pounding from the humiliation she had just been through. The soft hum of the plane filled the cabin, but her mind was too focused on the scene she had been picturing. She had worked hard in the hospital for days, barely getting any rest, only to be treated like an intruder in the section she had paid for. She clenched her hands in her lap and tried to keep her breathing steady. She knew from experience that she shouldn't lose her cool in situations like this, to stay calm, observe, and let the truth come out. Her brother Aiden had always told her this. Aiden, what's the name of the flight attendant? Maya quickly looked toward the front of the plane and saw Lisa standing there still helping business class passengers as if nothing had happened. She moved with the same stiff posture and her head held high, completely unaware of the mistake she had just made. Maya typed back Lisa Dawson, and Aiden got it right away. Don't do anything, just wait, she exhaled as she leaning back against her seat. That was the thing about Aiden, he never acted without thinking. He was always in charge. When he said wait, it meant something big was about to happen at the front of the plane. Lisa kept checking tickets, smiling at well-dressed business bus passengers, and offering drinks that she had never offered Maya. She didn't think about the nurse she had just led to the back of the plane. In her mind, it was just another day of keeping things in order. But then something changed. The intercom went off, and the captain's steady voice filled the cabin. Miss Dawson, please report to. Lisa's smile fell for the first time, and some passengers looked up, sensing that something was wrong. She turned to Hannah, one of the other flight attendants who had been watching from the sidelines. Did the captain say my name? Lisa asked Hannah, her voice quieter now. Yes, you should probably go, Hannah replied slowly. Lisa straightened her uniform, swallowing the uneasy feeling that was rising in her chest. She had never been called to the cockpit during a flight before, but she pushed the thought. Lisa walked quickly toward the cockpit, trying to keep a neutral expression. She didn't like being surprised, and being called to the front of the plane like this made her feel uneasy. When she got to the cockpit door, the first officer, Captain Hughes, stood just inside with his arms crossed and an unreadable expression next to him. The in-flight phone was still on and a video call was showing on the small screen. Lisa's whole world was about to turn upside down. Miss Dawson, the captain said in a steady voice, we have a situation. Lisa forced a polite smile and asked, of course, Captain, is there an issue I need to help with? The man on the video screen leaned forward a little, his voice carrying the weight of authority. My name is Aiden Patel, and I am the majority shareholder of this airline, he said. Miss Dawson, Lisa's heart skipped a beat. A shareholder, she opened her mouth to answer, but he didn't give her the chance. I just received a report. Dr. Maya Patel, a paid business class passenger, was moved from her seat to an economy seat by you. His words were slow and deliberate. Would you like to explain why? Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Maya Patel. She replayed the interaction in her head, suddenly realizing why the name sounded familiar. Her heart raced. She was in the wrong seat. Lisa quickly straightened her back and said, I followed protocol for business classes for premium passengers, and she's a premium passenger. Aiden cut in, not only did she pay for that seat but… Lisa's face turned pale as Aiden's voice got colder. Miss Dawson, he said, you didn't just embarrass a random passenger, you snatched away a top medical professional from the seat she paid for in front of a whole cabin full of people. You made an assumption without checking the system or verifying the manifest, and now he paused, his eyes sharp, you are responsible for this disaster. Lisa's hands clenched at her throat. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but this was different. This was powerful people with powerful consequences. The captain cleared his throat and said, we have received a direct order from Mr. Patel that you will personally escort Dr. Patel back to business class and issue a formal apology. Lisa's body went stiff. In all her years of service, she had never been forced to apologize to a passenger, but the look she was getting from both men told her there was no room for error. When this flight lands, you will be reporting to the executive board for a full review if I don't like what I hear, Aiden Patel said sharply. Consider your career over. Lisa swallowed hard. This wasn't just a mistake anymore, her whole future was on the line. Captain Hughes pointed to the cabin door and said, "Miss Dawson, fix your mistake." Lisa forced herself to nod, and she walked out of the cockpit, her legs feeling unsteady for the first time in years. This wasn't her flight tour. Lisa stepped out of the cockpit with her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were sweaty, and her once immaculate uniform felt too tight, like it was suffocating her. She had spent years commanding respect in the air and making sure people knew their place, but now she was the one being told what to do. She took a slow breath and stole a moment to herself as she made her way back through business class C. She could feel the people who were climbing the stairs. People who had barely noticed her before were now paying close attention to her because they could feel the change in power. Some exchanged quick glances, while others pretended to be lost in their screens, but no one was fooled. As she got closer to economy, Maya Patel was still sitting by the window and looking at the sky. She didn't look angry or even surprised, she was just waiting. Lisa hesitated for a half-second and then forced her face to look neutral and professional. Her voice was quieter this time and didn't carry as much. "Dr. Patel," she said, being careful to say the title she had ignored before. There had been a misunderstanding. When Maya finally turned to face her, she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she just looked at Lisa with a steady, unreadable gaze. "There was a misunderstanding," she repeated in a calm voice. "A misunderstanding." Lisa nodded stiffly. "Yes, I'd like to escort you back to your original seat in business class." The words tasted bitter because she had to correct herself. She had spent years making snap decisions. The woman thought no one would question her, but she was now being questioned without saying a word. Maya didn't move or even reach for her bag. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and said, "I had my ticket." A few people nearby moved around in their seats while pretending to look at their phones, but they were clearly listening. Lisa swallowed and said, "Choose your words carefully." "I may have made an error in judgment." Maya blinked and waited. Lisa let out a breath. Lisa had spent years of waiting admitting she was wrong about something. She had misjudged you. Maya nodded once and then finally stood up. She reached for her bag, her movements slow and deliberate. She wasn't rushing or flustered, she was in charge now, and Lisa knew it. As Maya walked into the aisle, Lisa turned and walked ahead of her toward the front of the plane, but this time she didn't walk with the same stiff confidence she usually did. This time, her steps were uncertain because she was walking straight into the. Maya followed Lisa down the narrow aisle, feeling the change in energy around her. The people in the economy section had seen what happened earlier and watched in silence, their faces showing a range of emotions from curiosity to quiet satisfaction. Some even exchanged knowing glances as if they were silently acknowledging that justice was being done. Lisa, on the other hand, kept her eyes straight ahead and her movements were stiff. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, the weight of the moment pressing down like a heavy stone on her shoulders. She wasn't in charge anymore, and what was worse, she knew it as they walked into business class. The atmosphere was completely different. There were plush leather seats with extra legroom, and soft conversation filled the air. It was a world away from the crowded economy seats where she had just made Maya sit. People in business class who had chosen to ignore the earlier arguments suddenly pretended to be focused on their magazines, tablets, or drinks, but Maya could tell they were thinking about her because of the way their eyes flickered toward her and how some of. They sat up a little straighter when they realized she was supposed to be here the whole time. Lisa stopped at seat 3B and turned her face so that it was impossible to read. "Here you are," she said stiffly, stepping aside. MAA put her bag down and slowly and deliberately took her seat back, the seat she had been forced out of moments before and had every right to be in. She buckled her seatbelt and adjusted the armrest, then turned her head slightly toward Lisa, waiting. Lisa's hands were clenched into fists because she knew what was going to happen. She had to hold her breath and say, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." Some people looked up, and one raised an eyebrow as if to silently acknowledge how forced it sounded. Maa gave a small nod, but she wasn't done. "A misunderstanding," she repeated softly, "that's what you're calling it." Lisa stiffened and said, "You didn't question anyone else's ticket." Maya said, "Just mine." Lisa's throat felt dry, and she couldn't deny it. She had made a choice based on an assumption. If there was a misunderstanding, Maya tilted her head and said, "Tell me exactly what happened." Lisa couldn't answer. The tension between them was so high that even the people who were pretending not to hear could no longer ignore it. Lisa let out a sharp breath and said, "I made a mistake." Maya looked at her for a moment longer before finally turning away, ending the conversation without saying a word. That was worse than anything Lisa had said. Lisa swallowed hard and took a step back. She turned quickly and walked away as quickly as she could without making it obvious she just wanted to disappear. As she walked toward the front of the cabin, the truth finally hit her. She hadn't just embarrassed herself in front of other people. She had embarrassed herself in front of the wrong person, and she had no idea what would happen next. Lisa walked quickly toward the galley, her heart pounding in her ears. Her hand shook as she reached for a tray, pretending to be busy with arranging glasses. She needed a moment to calm down and think, but taking a deep breath wouldn't change what had just happened. She had to say sorry in front of the whole business class cabin, and she knew everyone was watching. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You really messed up this time," said Hannah, the younger flight attendant who was standing next to Lisa. Lisa clenched her jaw and said, "I don't need a lecture right now." Hannah shrugged and said, "I'm not lecturing. I'm just wondering how you're going to fix this when we land." Lisa stiffened and said, "Fix this?" There was no fixing it. Hannah took a step closer and said, "You think you've dealt with difficult passengers before, right? But this isn't just about a passenger, Lisa. You moved the owner's sister." Lisa's stomach twisted violently. While trying to fix the problem, she hadn't really thought about what it meant that Aiden Patel owned a big stake in the airline. Maya Patel wasn't just a doctor, she was family. Hannah asked, "Do you think Aiden Patel is going to let this go?" She let the question go without answering and then shook her head. "I've worked here long enough to know how this works," she said. "People don't get away with things like this when it involves people at the top." Lisa's breathing was shallow as she realized what was happening. Once, she not only insulted a crying passenger, but she also put down the sister of the airline's most powerful man, Aiden Patel, who didn't forget things easily. Lisa grabbed the counter to steady herself. Her mind was racing with questions like, is there anything she can do to fix this before the plane lands? Hannah stared at her intently, her eyes sharp, and after a moment she said something that made Lisa's blood run cold. "You might want to start thinking about what your next job is going to be." Lisa couldn't breathe. Hannah was a flight attendant. For more than 10 years, she had built her career on being able to deal with customers, keep things organized, and make quick decisions. But this wasn't just a bad choice, it was the kind of mistake that ended careers, and Lisa's might be over before the wheels even touched the runway. As the weight of her mistake settled deeper into her chest, she tightened her grip on the tray. Her job had always been about controlling the passengers, the seating, and every situation before it went out of hand. Now was the first time she had lost complete control. There was a sharp buzzing sound in the cabin, and the in-flight phone in the galley lit up with a small screen flashing with an incoming call. Lisa's stomach dropped. She knew who it was. She hesitated for half a second before forcing herself to lift the receiver. Her hand felt unsteady as she pressed it to her ear. "This is Lisa," she said, keeping her voice professional even though her stomach was turning. "This is Aiden Patel," came the voice on the line. Although he wasn't angry, something about the way he spoke made the air feel too heavy and sharp. "I assume by now you understand the severity of what you've done," he said. Lisa opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Aiden didn't wait for an answer. "I gave you a direct order. You escorted my sister back to business class. You gave her a weak excuse for an apology." There was a pause, and then his voice got rougher. "Do you really think that's enough?" Lisa's throat was dry. "I was just following the rules." She let out a slow breath, but it wasn't out of anger. It was the kind of measured silence that showed he was thinking about how bad this was going to be for her. "Tell me, Miss Dawson," he asked, "what did you see when you looked at her?" Lisa froze. The question hit her harder than she thought it would. "You assumed she didn't belong in business class," Aiden said. "You assumed without checking the system, without verifying the manifest, you saw a woman in scrubs tired from work and decided she was in the wrong place." Lisa's fingers curled around the phone eye. She felt a cold chill go down her spine as Aiden finally spoke. This time the silence was longer, and Lisa could feel its weight pressing against her chest. "I want you to listen carefully," he finally said. "This will determine what happens to you when we land." Lisa closed her eyes, already dreading what was about to happen. "From now until this plane touches the ground, you will personally ensure that Mayor receives the exact service that every other business class passenger gets. You will not ignore her." Lisa nodded even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, sir," and Aiden added in a harsh voice, "When we land, you will report directly to the airline's executive board. There will be no excuses, no explanations, and you will be held responsible for every decision you made today." Lisa's breath caught. She had been holding on to hope that maybe this could be worked out, but Aiden Patel had just made it clear that this wasn't going away. The call ended with a soft sigh. Lisa slowly put down the phone and stared at nothing. Her mind was blank, and her legs felt like they weren't even supporting her anymore because she knew for sure that this flight would be the longest of her life. Lisa stayed frozen in the galley, gripping the counter so hard that her knuckles turned white. Aiden Patel's words suffocated her. She had spent years dealing with difficult passengers, enforcing rules, and keeping order, but this wasn't something she could control. The walls of the plane. She suddenly felt smaller and less free. She had to walk back into that cabin, keep working, and keep smiling, even though she knew that everyone had seen her fail and that Hannah was still standing a few feet away with her arms crossed. Hannah didn't say anything, but Lisa could feel her silent judgment. Lisa let out a sharp breath, straightened her uniform, and forced herself to move one foot in front of the other. That was all she had to focus on as she walked back into the business class cabin. When she came back, people subtly glanced at her, showing a range of emotions from interest to quiet disapproval. They weren't just looking at her, they were judging her. For years, Lisa had been in charge and people feared her when they tried to break the rules. Now, for the first time, she was being watched. She forced a small smile and walked toward the first-class service card, reaching for a bottle of sparkling water while double-checking the label for there. She carefully made her way to seat 3B, where Maya was sitting comfortably and reading an in-flight magazine. If she was still upset, she didn't show it. Her presence alone was enough to make Lisa uncomfortable. She swallowed the pain in her throat and put the drink on Maya's tray table, saying, "Here's your sparkling water, Dr. Patel," in a quieter voice than usual. Maya didn't look up right away. She turned a page rather than looking at the screen. She finally looked up from her magazine page and couldn't make out Lisa's expression. Lisa forced herself to make eye contact, even though it was much harder than before. "Can I bid you anything else?" Lisa asked, her voice too tight and forced. "You didn't ask me that before." Maya took a slow sip of the drink and then set it down. You didn't offer me anything. You didn't even greet me properly like you did with the other passengers. Lisa blinked. Excuse me. Maya tilted her head. Lisa said, I'm sorry about that, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Maya looked at her for a moment longer and then nodded. I'll have a hot tea. Lisa gave her a quick nod, then practically ran back to the galley. She could hear the low murmur of conversations behind her and the quiet shift in energy as passengers looked at each other. They were still watching as she carefully made the tea, making sure everything was perfect when she got back. Lisa lingered for a moment, hoping for something she didn't know, maybe a sign that this was over or that she could breathe again, but Maya didn't spare her another glance, and that felt worse than anything Lisa could have imagined. As Maya turned to leave, Lisa felt her stomach twist, and she knew that the rest of the flight was like a punishment she couldn't get away from because she knew this wasn't just about one moment. It was about what would happen when they landed, and she couldn't get away from it. Lisa moved back to the galley and gripped the edge of the counter like it was the only thing that was holding her steady. Her hands were still shaking. For the past 10 years, she had been in charge of keeping people in line and making sure that the rules were followed, but now she was the one losing control. She looked at the clock above the service station and saw that she still had 2 more hours to feel the weight of every look, whisper, and longing stare from people who had seen what she had done. What happened? She had to answer for everything in 2 more hours, so she closed her eyes for a moment to try to fight the anxiety that was starting to rise up her spine. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had dealt with difficult situations before, like angry passengers, last-minute policy changes, and famous quiets, but this was the first time she had to deal with something like this. Taking a deep breath, she stood up and forced herself to do the things she needed to do: refill the drink cart, check the. If she could just focus on her job, maybe the time would go by faster, but she could feel it, the tension in her hair, and then it happened, the in-flight phone rang again. Lisa's stomach dropped, and she knew it wasn't good before she even picked it up. She slowly reached for the receiver and held it to her ear. This is Lisa, she said, keeping her voice steady. This is James Cotter, Senior Operations Manager. This is Miss Dawson. Lisa's face was drenched in blood as the Senior Operations Manager told her this wasn't just a routine disciplinary call, it was serious. She swallowed hard and tightened her grip on the phone. Of course, Mr. Cotters, what can I do for you? He asked. There was a pause, and then his voice came through, calm but heavy. You will be escorted off the aircraft as soon as we land. Lisa stopped breathing and opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mr. Connors kept talking. Upon arrival, you will report. Lisa's chest hitched as she thought about the executive hearing. This wasn't just a warning, it was the end of her career. She forced herself to say, yes, I understand. Just before the call ended, Mr. Cotters added one last thing: Miss Dawson, you should prepare yourself because you will be answering directly to Mr. Patel. The line went dead, and Lisa slowly lowered the receiver, her hand shaking so badly that she almost dropped it. People laughed quietly in the cabin. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisles and the plane hummed softly as it flew through the sky, but Lisa couldn't hear any of it. All she could hear was the sound of her career slipping away. She had been so sure she was untouchable, and now she was about to find out how wrong she was. Lisa stood still in the galley, the cold realization sinking deep into her bones. She was led off the plane by an executive hearing, where she spoke directly to Aiden Patel. The words stuck in her mind like a broken record. For the first time in her career, this wasn't just a disciplinary meeting, it was a reckoning. She had no way out. Her legs felt unsteady as she turned and pressed both palms against the cool metal counter in front of her. She tried to slow her breathing and think, but the anxiety curling in her stomach made it impossible. What was worse was that she had done this to herself. She had been so sure that Maya Patel didn't belong in. She had been in business class and hadn't even thought about checking the system or questioning her assumption. Now she had embarrassed the sister of one of the most powerful men in the airline industry. She could already picture it. As soon as the plane landed and security was waiting for her at the jet bridge, she would be let off like a rule-breaking passenger she had once been so quick to dismiss. Passengers would see her crew and see her as a public example of what happens when someone in power does the wrong thing. Lisa felt sick to her stomach. This was worse than being fired. This was public humiliation on a level she had never experienced before, and it wasn't even over yet. She turned around expecting Hannah to scold her again, but it wasn't Hannah, it was Maya. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Maya to come to her for a moment. Neither of them spoke. Lisa looked at Ma, who stood there with an air of quiet authority. She wasn't smug or gloating. She didn't need to. Finally, Maya spoke up. "I assume you bought the call." Lisa swallowed hard and nodded stiffly yes. Ma looked at her for a moment before softly exhaling. "I don't like seeing people lose their jobs, but I do believe in accountability." Lisa's throat tightened. Ma kept her voice level and asked, "What do you think is going to happen when we land?" Lisa hesitated because she already knew the answer. "I'll be facing an executive review." Ma tilted her head a little and then what Lisa struggled to say. Say something to lighten the mood of the conversation, but she couldn't. There was no reason she could give that would make things better. "I don't know," Lisa finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya let the silence between them last for a moment before speaking again. "Let me ask you something, Miss Dawson." Lisa flinched at the use of her name by the woman who had wronged her when she was told to move. "What was going through your mind?" Maya asked. "Did you even stop to?" Lisa clenched her fists and wanted to defend herself, saying that she was just doing her job, following the rules, and making a simple mistake. But she couldn't because Maya already knew the truth. Lisa had seen her tired face and scrubs and made a decision before even checking the facts. Maya didn't need her to say it out loud, she already knew. Lisa let out a slow, shaky breath and said, "I made an assumption." Maya gave a small nod as if she had understood. Lisa's cheeks got hot. This conversation wasn't just awkward, it was devastating. She had spent her whole career acting like she knew more than passenger, as if she were always right. Now she had to admit out loud to the person she had disrespected that she was wrong. She swallowed her answer and said, "Yes." Maya looked at her for a moment longer and then finally nodded. She didn't say anything else, she just turned and walked back toward Lisa. Lisa stood there with a strange feeling in her chest. It wasn't just fear of losing her job, it was the realization that her mistake wasn't just about following company policy. It was about something deeper and uglier, and now she had to live with it. Lisa stayed in the galley long after Maya went back to her seat. Her hands were still gripping the counter, and she breathed out in slow, shallow bursts as the weight of what had just happened settled on her. Deeper into her chest, making it harder to breathe for the first time in her career. She wasn't just afraid of losing her job, she was afraid of what losing her job would mean. It wasn't just about the paycheck, it was about who she was in that uniform. Standing here in the quiet galley, she had to ask herself a question she had never asked herself before. Was she the kind of person who deserved the power she had? Her chest felt tight. She had built her career on being sure that she was right, that she could enforce the rules, and that passengers needed her to keep things in order. But now she wasn't sure of anything. Suddenly, Miss Dawson's voice woke her up. Lisa jerked, and Hannah stood there with her arms crossed and an expression that couldn't be read. Lisa wasn't in the mood for another lecture. She had been dragged through enough in the last few hours. But Hannah didn't say anything for a long time. She just stood there. Hannah carefully eyed Lisa as if deciding if it was even worth talking to her. "When I first started working with you, I thought you were one of the best flight attendants on staff," she finally said. "You always seemed so competent, like you knew exactly how to handle every situation. You made quick decisions, and you never let passengers push you around." Lisa frowned, surprised. "I admired that in a way." Hannah shrugged. "This wasn't where I had expected this conversation to go," she said. Lisa's stomach twisted as Hannah sighed and leaned against the counter. "You didn't second-guess yourself when you told Dr. Patel to move, not even for a second." "That's not confidence, Lisa, that's arrogance," Hannah said. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out because Hannah was right. She hadn't questioned herself once, not even when Maya showed her the ticket, not even when she asked her to check the system. Lisa had already made up her mind before she spoke. Hannah tilted her head slightly and asked, "I guess the real question is, do you even know why you did it?" Lisa stiffened. She wanted to answer. She wanted to say it was a simple mistake because she was tired and trying to do her job, but the truth was much worse. She had seen Maya in her scrubs, her tired face, and the way she was sitting quietly in her seat, not acting like a high-class business class passenger, and she thought Maya was rude. Didn't belong, and she hadn't even realized she was doing it until it hit her in the chest. Hannah must have seen it on her face because Lisa looked away, unable to meet Hannah's eyes. There was a long silence between them before Hannah spoke again. "You know, if this was just about a bad decision, I think Mr. Patel would have let it slide," she said. Lisa's head snapped up at what Hannah said. "Rich people don't usually get involved in things like this unless they have to. If it was just about moving a passenger, you might have gotten a warning or even a suspension, but an executive hearing?" She took a deep breath and said, "That means this isn't just about one bad call, Lisa. It's about something bigger than that." Hannah was right. This wasn't just about one incident. It was about what it stood for. Maya Patel was lucky. She had connections. Her brother was powerful enough to make sure justice was done. But how many others were there? How many times had Lisa made similar judgments in the past? How many passengers had she subtly treated differently without realizing it? How many times had she made someone feel like they didn't belong without getting in trouble? Lisa's breath got shorter. This wasn't just about today. This was about years of unchecked power. Lisa felt sick. She turned back toward the deli to brace herself against it as the truth hit her. She had spent 10 years building herself up, and in one flight she had torn it all down. Hannah moved next to her and said, "I guess the only thing left to ask is if you had a chance to fix this, would you?" Lisa swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if she could fix it anymore, but she did know that when this flight landed, she wouldn't just be fighting for her job, she would be fighting for who she was going to be going forward, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure she liked who she had been before. Lisa had never felt time move so slowly. The background noise of the engines and the soft murmur of passengers. The sound of ice clinking in glasses in the distance mixed with the storm going on inside her. Her mind wouldn't stop racing with all the things Hannah had said and Maya had made her face. The whole flight had taken away layers of competence she used to wear like armor, and now she was naked and embarrassed. She had no one to blame but herself. She looked over at Maya, who was sitting in business class sipping her tea. She wasn't talking to anyone or making a scene. She had won. This fight without raising her voice, demanding attention, or asking for revenge, which made things even worse. Lisa had dealt with rude, angry, or entitled passengers before. She had put them in their place without hesitation and never lost sleep over it. But Maya Patel hadn't been rude or entitled, she had just existed, and Lisa still thought she didn't belong. A new wave of nausea curled in her stomach. This was different. Lisa intentionally turned her attention away from the service cart to act busy, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, Lisa." It was Mr. Bennett, a businessman in his mid-50s, sitting near the aisle and looking at her with a raised brow. He had the air of calm arrogance that comes with money. "I was wondering if I could bid another whiskey," he said, swirling the drink in his glass. Half-melted ice was in Mr. Bennett's glass, and Lisa quickly said, "Of course, sir." She carefully poured the drink while focusing on keeping her hands steady. Mr. Bennett took a sip and slowly let out a breath. It was quite the show back there. Lisa stiffened. He wasn't talking about the whiskey. She forced a polite smile even though her stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," she said. Mr. Bennett leaned back in his seat and looked at her with some interest. "That whole thing with the doctor I was watching," he said. "And so was everyone else." Lisa felt the blood drain from her face. She could tell from the look on her face that people were looking at her and judging her, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. Mr. Bennett took another slow sip. "You know, I've flown on this airline for years and seen a lot of things, but I have to say I've never seen a flight attendant forced to walk someone back to their seat like that." He laughed. Lisa swallowed hard. Keeping her expression neutral must have been humiliating. She clenched her teeth and said it was, but she wasn't going to say anything. Mrs. Bennett smirked and said, "Sure you were." Lisa's heart raced as he continued to swirl his drink. "You made a bad call, and now you're going to pay for it." He leaned forward a little and lowered his voice. "The real question is, how bad do you think it's going to be?" Lisa clenched her jaw. "Excuse me," he said, pointing to Maya with his drink. "That woman has power, her brother has more, and you, well, I wouldn't be surprised if this is your last flight in that uniform." Mr. Bennett laughed again. "That's how it works, isn't it? People like them make the rules, and people like you enforce them. And when things go wrong," smirked he, "someone has to take the fall." Lisa couldn't breathe because he was right. She had been following someone else's unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't, and when those rules turned out to be wrong, she was the one who had to pay the price. The thought of losing her boyfriend made her stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with fear of losing her boyfriend. She had spent years following this system, believing in it, and upholding it, and now it was swallowing her whole. She quickly turned away, mumbled "excuse me," and ran toward the galley. She needed to be alone to think because for the first time, she wasn't just wondering what would happen when they landed, she was wondering about everything. Lisa gripped the counter in the galley, her mind racing as Mr. Bennett's words sucked at her like invisible hands tightening around her. Her throat, "People like them make the rules, and people like you have to follow them. When something goes wrong, someone has to take the blame." He was right. She had spent years thinking she was in charge, that her authority was absolute, that she knew who belonged and who didn't. But now she realized she wasn't in charge at all. She was just a part of a bigger system that had taught her to assume things without questioning them in order to follow rules that were written down but were always understood. That was what made her embarrass the wrong passenger. But what about all the other times she had done the same thing when no one important was watching? The thought made her sick. She had never questioned herself before, not when she paid more attention to a well-dressed businessman than to someone who looked like they had saved up for their ticket, not when she thought a younger passenger in economy was trying to sneak into a better seat, not when she looked at Maya Patel and decided, if Maya had been wearing a designer suit instead of scrubs, would I have treated her the same way? The question hit her like a punch in the gut, and the answer was no. Lisa squished her eyes shut and gripped the cold metal counter so tightly that her knuckles turned white. For years, she had thought of herself as someone who followed the rules and kept things in order, but now she had to question whether she was really doing that or whether she was just enforcing her own. She swallowed hard and blinked quickly as her heart raced in her ears. She felt like someone had ripped away every lie she had told herself and every excuse, forcing her to look at herself clearly for the first time, and she didn't like what she saw. Lisa had always thought she was firm but fair, that her authority was unbiased, and that she was just doing her job. But if that was true, then why was she standing here shaking, knowing deep down that she had done something much worse than make a bad call? She looked at another person and decided, based on her own unconscious biases, that they didn't belong. Now she was about to lose everything because of it. She wiped her forehead, feeling hot all of a sudden even though the galley was cool. The in-flight phone rang again, making her stomach drop. She didn't want to answer it because she didn't want to hear another voice reminding her the job she was about to lose, but she had to pick it up anyway, her fingers shaking. "This is Lisa," she said in a calm but firm voice. Lisa stiffened and said, "You should get ready for landing." The captain continued, "We've received final confirmation from the airline board that upon arrival, security will be escorting you off the aircraft." Lisa's mouth went dry. This wasn't a warning anymore. It wasn't just a possibility. It was happening. She was done. Lisa felt like she was falling even though the plane was still flying smoothly. She gripped the phone tighter and said, "Captain, I suggest you use the rest of this flight tour." The captain cut in with a professional tone, "Think carefully about what you're going to say because Aiden Patel himself will be waiting for you and I doubt he'll accept an excuse." The line went dead, and Lisa slowly hung up the phone. Her breath came in short bursts. She wasn't just afraid of losing her job, she was also afraid of having to face the person she had hurt. For the first time, she wasn't sure what scared her more, being fired or having to explain to Maya and Aiden Patel why she had done what she did. She already knew. Lisa stared blankly at the darkened screen of her in-flight phone. Her body was cold, even though the cabin was warm. Security would be waiting for Aiden Patel. Her career and the life she had built over a decade were about to fall apart as soon as the wheels touched the runway. She had never been afraid of landing before, but now it felt like the countdown to her death. As she turned around, she grabbed the metal edges of the service counter for support. There was no fixing this, no way to undo what she had done. Maya Patel hadn't made a scene, she had just waited for Lisa to find out the truth, and now it had. Lisa took a shaky breath, her chest tightened every second and felt like a weight was pressing down on her ribs, suffocating her. She looked over to the business class cabin and saw Maya sitting there calmly, as if nothing had happened. Lisa clenched her jaw, guilt hit her hard. She had treated this woman badly. Lisa felt like an outsider in a place she belonged, and now she was being asked to leave. The irony hit her harder than she wanted to admit, and she squeezed her eyes shut. For years, she had said that she was following protocol, but what if protocol wasn't the problem? What if the real problem was her? As soon as the thought crossed her mind, her stomach twisted violently, and she turned away, barely able to look at herself anymore. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice could be heard over the intercom. "Starting our descent into New York, please make sure that all of your seat belts are fastened, that your tray tables are put away, and that your seats are upright. Flight attendants, get ready for landing." Lisa's hands shook as she reached for a safety checklist. It was automatic, but this time it didn't feel like she was doing anything important. She had done this 1,000 times before, but now it felt like she was just going through the motions of a job that didn't belong to her. Her uniform, which had been a sign of authority, felt like a costume or a mask. When she thought about what would happen when they landed, her stomach turned. Security would be at the gate, and people would watch as she was led away like a criminal. She would be taken to an executive boardroom, which was somewhere she had never been before and never thought she would have to go. Aiden Patel would be waiting for her to explain and justify what she had done. She swallowed back the nausea that was rising in her throat. She had never been in someone else's judgment before, but now she was. She was scared because she couldn't change what happened next. As she locked the galley and made her way through the cabin for her final checks, she could feel the tension in the air. People weren't staring at her directly, but their looks were quick, sharp, and full of silent judgment. They all knew Lisa had spent years making snap decisions and moving people around like they were pieces on a board, but now she was the one being moved. When she got to Myers's row, the doctor was still sitting quietly staring out the window. Lisa hesitated, her throat felt tight, and her heart was pounding against her ribs. She should say something, but she didn't want to say the forced apology she had already said. She should at least try to admit what she had done, but how do you say sorry for something that can't be fixed? She opened her mouth, but Maya turned and looked at her. Lisa froze. Maya didn't need to say anything because Lisa could see everything in her calm, steady gaze, the understanding, the disappointment, and the understanding. Lisa's chest tightened as she realized that Maya wasn't just waiting for the plane to land. She was waiting to see if Lisa would finally say something real, not an excuse or a forced apology, the truth. Lisa's hands curled into fists at her sides as the plane's landing gear came out. This was her last chance, one last moment. Before everything changed, she finally spoke, "I was wrong." The words were quieter than she had hoped, and Maya blinked and said, "Excuse me." Lisa swallowed and forced herself to hold the other woman's gaze. "I was wrong," she repeated, her voice steady but heavy about you and everything. Maya didn't answer right away. She looked at Lisa carefully, as if she was waiting to see if she really meant it. Lisa took a slow breath. "I didn't even check the system." Lisa had admitted, "I thought you didn't belong in business class." "Scrubs, I saw how tired you were and made a decision without even thinking. I didn't question it because I thought I was right." The words hurt like she had peeled back a layer of herself and shown something ugly underneath. Maya didn't respond right away, but after a long moment, she nodded. Lisa didn't know what that meant or if it changed anything, but saying it out loud, without making excuses or trying to protect herself, felt like the only thing she could do. She had spent. After years of thinking she was always right, Lisa finally realized that being right wasn't the same as being fair. The wheels hit the runway with a soft but firm thud. The descent was over, but Lisa's real reckoning was just beginning. As the plane taxied down the runway, the familiar hum of the engines gradually faded as it got closer to the gate. Passengers shifted in their seats, stretched, and grabbed their bags, getting ready for the moment the seatbelt sign would go off, signaling the end of the journey for everyone else on this flight. Lisa's day wasn't over yet, it was just getting started. As she made her way back to the galley for the last time, her hands shook. She had done this routine 1,000 times before, thanking passengers and acting like the weight of the flight never followed her outside the cabin doors. But now she couldn't pretend anymore, because outside the plane, in the terminal, she would face the reality she had spent the last few hours trying to ignore. She had built her career around power and control, and now she was walking straight into a room. She wouldn't have any of it. The intercom said, "Welcome to New York. On behalf of the crew, we thank you for flying with us today. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign has been turned off." There was a soft ding, and then the sounds of people unbuckling their seatbelts and opening overhead bins filled the cabin. People were already standing to get their bags and stretching their stiff legs, the usual chaos of arrival, but Lisa barely heard any of it because she was standing just outside the open cockpit door. 2 uniformed officers were waiting near the jet bridge. Their eyes were scanning the cabin, and they were standing still, but Lisa knew they weren't there for a routine check. Lisa's throat tightened, and she forced herself to keep moving. Her crew members gave her sidelong glances, but none of them dared to speak. They all knew what was going on, and they all knew that Lisa Dawson wasn't going to be leaving this plane today as a flight attendant. Passengers slowly made their way toward the. Lisa looked over at Maya, who hadn't moved from her seat yet. She sat there with the same calmness she had shown throughout the flight, her face blank. Lisa hesitated. She thought about saying something else, but what else was there to say? Maya had already heard the truth, and what happened next was no longer in Lisa's control. Maya stood and grabbed her bag from the overhead bin with such ease that Lisa felt even smaller. She was strong without even trying and without ever raising her voice. Lisa had spent years demanding. Maya had easily earned Lisa's respect as she walked down the aisle. When she finally turned to look at her, she didn't gloat, smirk, or seem happy about what was about to happen. Instead, she said, "I hope you learn from this," and then she walked past Lisa to join the other passengers getting off the plane. Lisa swallowed her hard, wondering if she would learn or if it would even matter if she did, because realizing what she had done would not erase it. Minutes passed, and the cabin was now empty. Lisa stood at the entrance of the plane and stared at the jet bridge like it was a cliff's edge. She had always walked off planes with purpose, her head held high and her back straight, but now she could barely move. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. As soon as she did, one of the security officers straightened up and asked, "Miss Dawson, do you need to come with us?" Lisa stiffly agreed. She knew it would happen, but hearing it out loud felt like a slap in the face. The officers didn't grab her or make a scene, but as she walked into the terminal, she could feel all eyes on her, passengers who had seen what happened, crew members from other flights, and even ground staff. They were all watching as Lisa Dawson, who had been the most respected flight attendant on board, was led away. Her face hurt, and she wanted to run away or disappear, but she kept walking, forcing herself to breathe, past the baggage claim and the boarding gates until they finally turned a corner and there she was. Patel was waiting for her in front of a private executive lounge. Lisa's heart stopped. He stood tall, his hands in the pockets of his tailored suit, and his face was blank. This was the man she had wronged without meaning to, the man who had ended her career with one phone call, and now she had to face him. She stepped forward, even though every instinct told her to back away, because she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everything she had stood for, and maybe it was time she. Lisa walked into the executive lounge as the doors to it opened, and the reckoning began. If you liked this story, please hit the like button and let us know what you would have done in this situation in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more stories like this.